The notification pinged on my phone at 11:47 p.m. while I was monitoring their bank account from my laptop in the cramped studio apartment I'd rented 3 blocks away. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. My parents didn't know that I'd been the one managing their entire financial empire for the past 2 years, or that I'd just frozen every single account they thought belonged to them. They definitely didn't know I was watching. Let us know in the comments where you're watching. If this resonated, don't miss out on subscribing because tomorrow I'm sharing something that will completely change how you think about this topic. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee and smiled as another declined transaction appeared on my screen. Some lessons are best taught through experience. Before we dive deeper, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because I've got something even more shocking coming tomorrow. My name is Cassandra Whitmore, and until 12 hours ago, I was the dutiful daughter of Reginald and Priscilla Whitmore, owners of Whitmore Industries, the largest textile manufacturing company in Millbrook County. Until this morning, I lived in their sprawling estate in the prestigious Rosewood Hills neighborhood, managed their social calendar, oversaw their household staff of 8, and most importantly, though they never acknowledged it, ran the entire financial backbone of their business empire. Today was my 25th birthday, and instead of the celebration I'd quietly hoped for, my parents had given me an ultimatum that changed everything. The morning had started normally enough. I'd woken at 5:30 a.m. as always, reviewed the overnight international market reports that affected our textile imports, and prepared the daily briefing that my father would later present to his board as his own insights. I'd arranged for fresh lilies to be delivered to the house, my mother's favorites, and confirmed the catering for the charity luncheon she was hosting that afternoon. What I hadn't done was remind anyone it was my birthday. You see, I'd learned long ago that the Whitmore family didn't celebrate my existence so much as tolerate it. While my younger brother Damien was currently backpacking through Europe on what my parents called his character-building journey, funded entirely from trust funds I'd established and managed, I was the invisible engine that kept their lives running smoothly. I held dual degrees in finance and international business from Thornfield University, graduating summa cum laude at 22. But instead of pursuing the career opportunities that had been offered to me at top firms in New York and London, I'd returned home to help temporarily when my father had suffered a minor heart attack 2 years ago. That temporary arrangement had evolved into my complete takeover of every significant financial decision in their lives, though they preferred to maintain the fiction that I was merely their assistant while Reginald retained all the important responsibilities. The reality was starkly different. I had power of attorney over their personal accounts, authorized signatory status on all business accounts, and managed their investment portfolio worth approximately $47 million. I'd structured their tax planning, negotiated their international contracts, and even arranged the mortgage refinancing on their various properties. Every contractor, every vendor, every business partner knew to contact me for final approval on anything involving the Whitmore finances. My parents had no idea how completely dependent they'd become on my expertise, or how thoroughly I'd positioned myself at the center of their financial universe. They saw my work as basic administrative support, the kind of tasks any competent secretary might handle. The confrontation had come at 10:30 a.m. while I was reviewing quarterly profit reports in my father's study, a room I'd essentially commandeered since taking over his business responsibilities. "Cassandra," my mother announced, sweeping into the room in her silk robe and perfectly styled hair, "we need to discuss your future." My father followed, looking uncomfortable but resolute. "Your mother and I have been talking, and we feel it's time for you to establish independence." I looked up from the financial projections that would determine whether they could afford the European vacation they'd already booked for next month. Independence? You're 25 now, Cassandra. Most young women your age are building careers, finding husbands, creating their own lives. Instead, you're here managing our household like some sort of... She paused, searching for words. "Like some sort of spinster," my father finished bluntly. "It's becoming embarrassing, Cassandra. The Pemberton's daughter just made partner at a law firm in the city. The Harrison girl is engaged to a surgeon. What do we tell people when they ask about your accomplishments? The casual cruelty of their assessment hit me like a physical blow. For 2 years, I'd sacrificed every personal opportunity to ensure their comfort and financial security. I'd turned down a prestigious position at Blackstone Financial because they'd needed me during my father's recovery. I'd ended a promising relationship with James Ashford because my parents had required constant availability for their social obligations. I see, I said quietly, closing my laptop. And what exactly are you proposing?
We're giving you until the end of today to find alternative living arrangements, my mother announced. We've already spoken to your cousin Patricia in Millbrook. She has a spare room you can rent while you look for proper employment. Today? I repeated, certain I'd misunderstood. We should have done this months ago, my father added. You've become too comfortable here, too dependent. It's not healthy for a young woman to be so attached to her parents' lives. The irony was staggering. They were characterizing my management of their entire existence as unhealthy dependence on my part. What about the business? I asked. The quarterly board meeting is next week. The Jameson contract needs finalization. The tax filings for the subsidiary companies are due. We managed perfectly well before you took over those responsibilities, my father interrupted. We'll manage again. My mother nodded agreement. Besides, we've decided to hire a proper business manager, someone with credentials from a respected firm, not just family assistants. I absorbed this information with growing clarity. They genuinely believed that my expertise was easily replaceable, that any competent professional could step into the complex financial ecosystem I'd spent 2 years constructing around their needs. They had no understanding of how thoroughly their lives depended on systems I created, relationships I cultivated, or knowledge I'd accumulated. They saw only the surface level of my work while remaining oblivious to its true scope and sophistication. I understand, I said finally, my voice steady despite the emotional earthquake occurring within me. I'll be out by evening. Good, my mother smiled with relief. This is really for the best, darling. You'll see, independence will be the making of you. After they left me alone in the study, I sat in the leather chair that had belonged to my grandfather, the man who'd actually built Whitmore Industries from nothing. Unlike my father, who'd inherited success without understanding how to maintain it, my grandfather had possessed the financial acumen I'd apparently inherited. That afternoon, while my parents hosted their charity luncheon downstairs, I methodically began implementing the contingency plan I'd developed months earlier when I'd first recognized how little they valued my contributions. I wasn't acting from emotion or spite, but from the cold recognition that if they wanted independence, they were about to discover exactly what that meant. Some lessons, I'd learned, are best taught through experience. And my parents were about to receive an education they'd never forget. If you're loving what you're hearing, smash that subscribe button. It really keeps us going. All right, let's jump back in. The charity luncheon was still in full swing downstairs when I began executing what I privately called Operation Independence. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents wanted me to be independent, and I was about to grant their wish in ways they never imagined. First, I accessed the secure server in my father's study, the one that housed all the digital records of Whitmore Industries. What my parents didn't know was that 6 months ago, during a routine security upgrade I'd convinced them was necessary, I'd restructured the entire digital infrastructure. Every password, every access code, every financial gateway now required my biometric authentication as the primary administrator. I hadn't done this maliciously. At the time, I'd genuinely trying to protect their assets after reading about several cyber attacks on family businesses. But their casual dismissal of my expertise this morning had crystallized something important. If they wanted to operate without me, they should have that opportunity. I started by downloading every crucial document onto encrypted drives. Contracts, vendor agreements, employee records, tax documents, international shipping manifests, not to steal or damage, but to ensure that when they inevitably came crawling back, I'd have everything they needed to convince them of my value. Next, I opened my secure communication with Lydia Montenegro, the forensic accountant I'd hired 3 months earlier. Lydia worked for Hartwell and Associates, the most respected financial investigation firm in the state. I'd initially engaged her services when I'd noticed some irregularities in our supplier payments that suggested potential embezzlement by our procurement manager. Cassandra, Lydia's voice was crisp over our encrypted call. I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. How are the embezzlement findings coming along? That situation is resolved, I said, settling deeper into the leather chair, but I need to discuss a different matter. Hypothetically, if someone had full financial power of attorney and signature authority over multiple accounts, and the account holders decided to terminate that person's involvement, what would be the proper legal procedure? There was a pause. Are we talking about your parents' accounts? Hypothetically. Cassandra, if you have legitimate power of attorney that was properly executed, no one can simply terminate your access without formal legal proceedings. The documents would need to be officially revoked through the courts or with your written consent. I smiled. And if the account holders attempted to conduct business without proper authorization? Any transactions attempted without the legally designated signatory would be flagged by the banks as potentially fraudulent, especially on accounts with the security protocols you've established. Thank you, Lydia. That's very educational. After ending the call, I contacted my second crucial ally, Harrison Blackthorne, senior partner at Blackthorne, Reed & Associates, the law firm that had been courting me for 2 years. Harrison had made it clear that his offer of employment remained open, and, more importantly, he'd expressed interest in representing high-net-worth individuals in complex family business matters. Cassandra? Harrison's enthusiasm was evident even over the phone. Please tell me you're finally ready to accept our offer? Potentially, I said, but first I need some legal consultation on a delicate family matter. I explained the situation in clinical terms, my parents' decision to remove me from their household and business affairs, despite my legal authority over their finances. Fascinating, Harrison mused. Your parents essentially want to fire you for managing their money while you legally control access to that money. Do they understand the position they've put themselves in? I don't believe they do. Well, they're about to get an expensive education in contract law and fiduciary responsibility. When would you like to start with us? I think Monday would be perfect timing. My third call was to Timothy Ashford, my former romantic interest whose relationship with me had ended when my parents demanded I prioritize their social obligations over my personal life. Cassie! Timothy's surprise was evident. I haven't heard from you in months. I know. I wanted to apologize for how things ended between us. My family situation was complicated. Is everything all right? You sound different. Everything is about to be very different, I replied. Timothy, remember when you said I was wasting my talents managing my parents' affairs instead of building my own career? I remember. You were right, and I'm about to do something about it. I explained that I would be available for dinner soon, perhaps as early as next week, to discuss both personal reconnection and potential professional collaboration. I'd like that very much. Cassie, whatever's happening with your family, you know you don't have to handle it alone, right? After ending the call, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, anticipation for my own future rather than anxiety about my parents' needs. The next phase of my preparation involved the most delicate operation: systematically transferring my personal assets out of any joint or accessible accounts while ensuring my parents couldn't touch the money I'd saved over the past 2 years. What they didn't know was that I'd been quietly building my own investment portfolio using the salary they'd never officially paid me for managing their affairs. Instead, I'd been borrowing from their petty cash from my personal expenses while directing my actual earnings, consulting fees from 3 other family businesses I'd helped restructure, into my private accounts. The total was substantial: $340,000 in investments, plus another $85,000 in liquid savings, more than enough to live independently for several years while establishing my own financial consulting practice. But the most crucial element of my preparation involved something my parents had never bothered to understand: the intricate web of personal relationships I'd built with every significant vendor, contractor, and service provider in their lives. I spent the afternoon making strategic phone calls. To Maria Santos, the housekeeper who coordinated the staff of 8 that maintained their estate: "Maria, there's going to be a transition in the household management. Starting tomorrow, you'll need to contact Mrs. Whitmore directly for all scheduling and payment approvals." To David Chen, their landscape architect who maintained the prize-winning gardens that were featured in Millbrook County's annual home tour: "David, I wanted to give you advance notice that I'll no longer be coordinating the grounds maintenance contracts. The spring renovation project we discussed will need to be approved through different channels." To Amanda Richardson, their personal shopper and event coordinator who managed their extensive social calendar: "Amanda, effective immediately, you'll be working directly with my parents rather than through me. I'm sure they'll have no difficulty maintaining the level of organization you're accustomed to." Each conversation was professional and cordial, but I made sure to emphasize the transition in a way that highlighted how dependent these relationships had become on my coordination. By late afternoon, as the charity luncheon concluded and guests began departing, I had successfully created a comprehensive safety net for myself while systematically removing the invisible support structure that had made my parents' lives function seamlessly. The beauty of my preparation was its complete legality. I hadn't stolen anything, damaged anything, or acted unethically in any way. I had simply stopped providing services they'd never acknowledged receiving and prepared to live the independent life they demanded I create. My parents had made one crucial miscalculation. They believed their wealth and status made them naturally competent at managing complex affairs. They'd never realized that competence isn't inherited, it's earned through expertise, attention to detail, and genuine understanding of systems and relationships. As I packed my personal belongings into 3 neat suitcases, I reflected on the strange sense of liberation I was experiencing. For the first time in 2 years, I would be working toward my own goals rather than maintaining someone else's lifestyle.
The studio apartment I'd secretly rented 3 months ago was modest but strategically located downtown, within walking distance of the financial district where I planned to establish my independent consulting practice. It was furnished simply but comfortably, and most importantly, it was entirely mine. At 6:30 p.m., exactly 8 hours after they delivered their ultimatum, I knocked on the door of my father's study where my parents were reviewing social photos from the luncheon. "I'm leaving now," I announced. "My keys are on the entry table, along with instructions for accessing the household management systems. I've also left contact information for all the vendors and service providers you'll need to coordinate with directly." My mother looked up with a bright smile. "Wonderful, darling. This is exactly what you needed. You'll thank us in a year when you've built a proper independent life." My father nodded approvingly. "Character building, Cassandra. It's never too late to develop self-reliance." I smiled back, genuine warmth in my expression. "You're absolutely right. I'm looking forward to discovering just how self-reliant we all can be." As I walked toward the front door of the estate where I'd spent my entire life, I felt my phone buzz with the first notification. Banking alert. Account access attempted. Authentication required. It was beginning.
The first banking alert came at 7:23 p.m., just as I was arranging my books on the shelves of my new studio apartment. My father had attempted to access the primary business account to pay the catering bill from today's charity luncheon. Transaction blocked. Primary signatory authentication required. I set down my copy of Advanced Corporate Finance and settled into my new desk chair, opening my laptop to the comprehensive monitoring system I'd established months ago. Every account, every credit card, every automatic payment was displayed in real time. It was like watching a very expensive theater performance from the best seat in the house. By 8:45 p.m., there had been 17 failed transaction attempts. The catering company, the florist, the wine supplier from today's luncheon, the monthly payment to the landscaping crew, even the automatic transfer to my brother Damien's European Adventure Fund, all blocked. My phone rang at 9:15 p.m. The caller ID showed Father. Cassandra, my father's voice carried the first hint of confusion I'd heard from him in years. There seems to be some sort of technical issue with our bank accounts. The payment systems aren't functioning properly. That's unfortunate. I'm genuinely sympathetic. Have you contacted the bank? I tried, but they're saying something about signature verification and authentication protocols. It's all technical nonsense. Could you call them tomorrow morning and sort this out? The request was so perfectly aligned with their fundamental misunderstanding of our relationship that I almost laughed. Even after kicking me out of their house, they still expected me to solve their problems. Father, I'm no longer managing your financial affairs, remember? You said you needed independence, and you were going to hire a proper business manager with credentials from a respected firm. There was a long pause. Well, yes, but this is clearly just a technical glitch. It shouldn't take more than a few minutes to resolve. I'm sure you're right, I agreed. I'm confident that someone with your business experience will handle it efficiently. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of the excellent Pinot Grigio I purchased with my own money and watched the monitoring screen as more transaction attempts failed. My parents were learning their first lesson in the difference between appearing to control their finances and actually understanding how their financial systems operated. The second wave of calls began at 10:30 p.m., this time from vendors who couldn't reach my parents directly. Ms. Whitmore, came the voice of Roberta Martinez, owner of Martinez Catering, who had provided the elegant spread for today's luncheon. I apologize for calling so late, but there's been an issue with payment processing. The credit card was declined, and when I tried the backup account information, that was also rejected. I'm sorry to hear that, Roberto. Have you tried contacting my parents directly? I'm no longer handling their financial arrangements. I tried calling the house, but the housekeeper said Mrs. Whitmore was not available to discuss business matters this evening. Of course she wasn't. My mother had never once dealt directly with vendor payments or understood the coordination required to maintain their lifestyle. I understand your concern, I told Roberto, but you'll need to work this out with them directly. I'm sure it's just a temporary technical issue. Similar calls came from the florist, the wine supplier from today's luncheon, and most amusingly, from the luxury car service that was supposed to transport my parents to the Pemberton's anniversary gala tomorrow evening. Each conversation followed the same pattern: confusion about payment failures, inability to reach my parents directly, and my polite redirection of their concerns. At 11:47 p.m., the notification I'd been waiting for finally appeared. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. My parents had attempted to order late-night takeout from their favorite upscale restaurant, Chez Laurent, where a typical dinner for two cost more than most families spent on groceries in a week. The beauty of this particular declined transaction was its perfect symbolism. Unable to cook for themselves, unable to manage their basic household systems, they'd tried to solve their hunger with their usual solution: throwing money at the problem, except now the money wasn't accessible.
My phone rang again at 12:15 a.m. This time, it was my mother, and her voice carried an edge of panic I'd never heard before.
Cassandra, something is very wrong with our financial accounts. Nothing is working. The credit cards, the bank transfers, even the petty cash account we use for household expenses. We can't access any of our money.
That does sound concerning.
I replied. "What did the bank tell you when you called?" "We haven't called yet. It's the middle of the night." "Mother, bank fraud departments operate 24 hours a day. If you genuinely believe there's unauthorized interference with your accounts, you should contact them immediately." "But you know how to handle these technical issues. I've always managed your finances because you asked me to. But today, you made it clear that arrangement was no longer beneficial. You wanted independence, and you specifically said you'd hire a professional business manager to handle these responsibilities." "This is different," my mother protested. "This is an emergency." "Then it sounds like exactly the kind of situation where your new business manager's expertise would be valuable." "We haven't hired anyone yet." I let that confession hang in the air for a moment. "So you removed me from managing your finances without having a replacement in place?" "We thought, I mean, we assumed you'd help with the transition." "After you told me to pack my belongings and leave by evening." Another long pause. When my mother spoke again, her voice was smaller. "Perhaps we were too hasty with the timing." "Perhaps," I agreed. "But the decision is made now. I'm sure you'll figure out a solution." Saturday morning brought a cascade of complications that my monitoring system captured in real time. The automatic payment for the household staff had failed, meaning Maria Santos and the 7 other employees who maintain the estate wouldn't receive their weekly wages. The monthly transfer to their country club had been declined, potentially resulting in suspension of privileges. Most critically, the payment for their homeowner's insurance had failed, leaving their multi-million-dollar estate temporarily uninsured. At 8:30 a.m., my father called again, his voice tight with controlled frustration. "Cassandra, this situation has gone beyond a simple technical glitch. We need you to come back and resolve these payment issues immediately." "I understand your concern, but I've moved out as you requested. I'm no longer in a position to manage your financial affairs." "Don't be ridiculous. This is obviously some sort of system error that you can fix in minutes." "Father, what you're experiencing isn't a system error. It's the result of security protocols I implemented to protect your assets. Every account requires biometric authentication from the primary signatory, which is me." The silence that followed was profound. "What are you saying?" he asked finally. "I'm saying that for the past 2 years, while you believed you were in control of your finances, I was actually the only person with access to your accounts. I have legal power of attorney, I'm the primary signatory on all business accounts, and I implemented security measures that require my personal authorization for any significant transactions." "That's impossible. These are our accounts." "They're accounts in your name, but under my management and control. Check the signature cards at the bank. Review the power of attorney documents you signed. Everything was done legally and with your full consent." I could hear my mother's voice in the background, shrill with rising panic, though I couldn't make out her words. "You're holding our money hostage," my father accused. "I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm simply no longer providing financial management services to people who decided they didn't need or want those services." "This is extortion." "This is independence. Exactly what you said I needed to develop. I'm no longer financially dependent on you, and you're about to discover what financial independence looks like when you actually have to manage your own affairs." The call ended abruptly, but my monitoring system showed increased activity as my parents attempted to access various accounts throughout the morning. Each attempt failed, and I could imagine their growing desperation as they realized the scope of their situation. At 11:30 a.m., Harrison Blackthorne called from his law office. "Cassandra, I've received a rather heated call from someone claiming to be your father. He's demanding that we force you to restore access to what he calls stolen accounts." "What did you tell him?"
I explained that you're our client now, and that based on the documentation you've provided, you have complete legal authority over the accounts in question. I also mentioned that attempting to coerce or threaten someone with legitimate financial power of attorney could constitute harassment. How did he respond? He hung up on me, but I suspect you'll be hearing from him again soon, probably with his own attorney. Let them come, I said. Everything I've done is completely legal. By noon, the situation had escalated beyond my parents' ability to contain. The country club had called about the declined payment. The catering company was threatening to place a lien on the house for yesterday's unpaid bill. Most embarrassingly, the Pemberton's anniversary gala was this evening, and the car service had canceled their reservation due to payment failure.
My parents, who had never missed a social obligation in their lives, were about to experience their first public embarrassment due to financial difficulties. At 2:15 p.m., my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Miss Whitmore, this is Gerald Pemberton. I believe you know my family." Indeed, I did. Gerald Pemberton owned the largest bank in Millbrook County and was one of my parents' oldest social contacts. "Of course, Mr. Pemberton. How can I help you?" "I received a rather unusual call from your father this morning. He seemed to be under the impression that someone had hacked into his bank accounts and stolen his money. He asked me to investigate what he called fraudulent activity on his accounts." "That's interesting. What did your investigation reveal?" "Well, I reviewed all the signature cards and authorization documents. Everything appears to be in perfect order. You're listed as the primary account holder and signatory on virtually every account associated with Whitmore Industries. Your father actually has very limited access to his own money." "That's correct." "I have to ask, Miss Whitmore, is everything all right? Your father seemed quite agitated and, frankly, confused about his own financial arrangements." "Everything is fine, Mr. Pemberton. My parents recently decided they wanted me to develop more independence, so I'm no longer managing their financial affairs. They're discovering that transition is more complex than they anticipated." Gerald chuckled. "I see. Well, if they need assistance understanding their own account structures, they're welcome to schedule an appointment with our wealth management team, though I should warn you, our fees for that level of handholding are quite substantial. I'm sure they'll figure out what works best for them." As evening approached and the monitoring system showed my parents still locked out of their own financial life, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. They had spent years taking my expertise for granted, treating my capabilities as basic administrative support, while never acknowledging the sophisticated systems I'd built to protect and grow their wealth. Now they were getting their first real education in exactly what I'd been doing for them and exactly what they'd lost when they decided my value was replaceable. Some lessons, I'd learned, are indeed best taught through experience. Sunday morning brought the first crack in my parents' unified front. At 7:45 a.m., my mother called, not my father, and her voice carried a tremor I'd never heard before. "Cassandra, sweetheart, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop downtown, reading the Sunday business section and enjoying my first leisurely morning in years. "Good morning, Mother. What kind of misunderstanding?" "About yesterday. About you moving out. Your father was... well, he was being dramatic about the independence thing. You know how he gets when he's trying to make a point." Interesting. They were already fracturing, each trying to distance themselves from the decision they'd made jointly less than 48 hours ago. "I see. And what's your perspective on the situation?" "I think we moved too quickly. Perhaps we could have handled the transition more gradually. You could move back home today, and we could work out a more reasonable timeline for your career development." Through my laptop, I watched their account monitoring system show 17 more failed transaction attempts since midnight. My father had been busy trying to access their European vacation fund, probably hoping to find an account I'd somehow missed.
That's thoughtful of you to reconsider, but I'm quite comfortable in my new apartment. And I start my new position at Blackthorne Reed and Associates tomorrow morning. New position? Her voice pitched higher. You didn't mention accepting a job offer. You told me to establish independence and find proper employment. Harrison Blackthorne offered me a senior associate position specializing in family wealth management. The timing worked out perfectly. What I didn't mention was that my starting salary was $240,000 annually, nearly double what most law firms paid recent graduates, plus a substantial signing bonus. Harrison valued my expertise in ways my parents never had. But what about our financial arrangements? Surely you're not going to abandon your family responsibilities entirely. There it was, the admission that they viewed my involvement in their finances not as a favor I'd been providing, but as a family obligation I was somehow required to fulfill. Mother, yesterday you characterized my involvement in your finances as unhealthy dependence that was preventing my personal growth. Today you're calling it a family responsibility. Which is it? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Perhaps, she said finally, we could discuss this more reasonably when your father isn't so emotional about the situation. Monday at Blackthorne Reed and Associates began with Harrison personally introducing me to the firm's most prestigious clients. By 10 a.m., I'd been assigned 3 new cases, a family business succession plan worth $80 million, a trust restructuring for a tech entrepreneur, and, most ironically, a consultation on protecting assets during contentious family disputes. Your reputation precedes you, explained Miranda Rothschild, the tech entrepreneur, as we reviewed her portfolio in the firm's elegant conference room. Gerald Pemberton mentioned your work with complex family business structures. He said you have an unusual talent for creating financial systems that actually protect families from their own poor decisions. I smiled. That's a diplomatic way to describe it.
He also mentioned that you recently became available because your previous clients decided they didn't need your services anymore. Their loss is clearly our gain. By lunchtime, I'd generated more billable hours than most associates managed in a full week, and Harrison was already discussing fast-tracking my promotion to partner. Meanwhile, my monitoring system showed increasing desperation from Rosewood Hills. My parents had missed their Monday morning appointment with their accountant because they couldn't access the account that held the retainer fee. The housekeeping staff had called in sick after not receiving their weekend wages, leaving my parents to discover they had no idea how to operate their own washing machine, security system, or even the complex coffee maker in their kitchen. Most critically, Damien had called from Prod in a panic because his credit card had been declined at a 5-star hotel where he'd been staying for the past week. My parents couldn't send emergency funds because they couldn't access any funds. At 2:30 p.m., I received a call from Lydia Montenegro. Cassandra, I've had an interesting morning. Your parents hired me to investigate what they're calling financial fraud related to their accounts. That's fascinating. What did your investigation reveal? Well, after reviewing all the documentation they provided, I had to inform them that no fraud has occurred. Every account transfer, every security protocol, every access restriction was implemented with proper legal authority and their written consent. I also had to explain that what they're experiencing isn't theft, it's the natural consequence of not understanding their own financial infrastructure. How did they respond to that assessment? Your father threatened to sue me for incompetence. Your mother asked if I could recommend a different forensic accountant who might reach a more favorable conclusion. And your recommendation? I told them they should probably hire a family business consultant to help them understand how to manage their own money. I may have mentioned that I know an excellent one that just joined Blackthorne, Reed and Associates. Tuesday brought the first real crisis. At 6 a.m., my phone rang with a call from Maria Santos, the head housekeeper. Miss Cassandra, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's been an emergency at the house. Mr. Whitmore collapsed last night and was taken to Millbrook General Hospital. My heart raced to spate everything. Is he all right? The doctors say it was exhaustion and stress, not another heart attack. But Miss Cassandra, your mother she's not handling things well. She doesn't know how to contact the insurance company. She can't access the medical accounts, and she's been calling you all night but says your phone goes straight to voicemail. I had indeed been screening their calls, but a medical emergency changed everything. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I told Maria. When I arrived at the hospital, I found my mother in the waiting room looking more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared from crying, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. "Cassandra," she rose unsteadily. "Thank God you're here. They're saying we need to provide insurance information and authorized treatments, but I can't access any of the medical accounts. I don't even know which insurance company we use." I sat beside her, pulling out my phone to access the healthcare management system I'd organized years ago. We use Pinnacle Health Services for primary coverage with supplemental coverage through Executive Medical Group. Dad's member ID is... I rattled off the numbers from memory. Within 30 minutes, I'd handled all the insurance authorizations, contacted his cardiologist for consultation, and arranged for a private room upgrade. The difference between my mother's helpless panic and my calm efficiency was stark. "How do you remember all of that?" she asked as we waited for the doctor's update. "Because I've been managing every aspect of your lives for 2 years, Mother. This is what I do." Dr. Patricia Chen, the attending physician, emerged at noon with reassuring news. "Mr. Whitmore is stable and recovering well. The collapse was brought on by acute stress and sleep deprivation, not cardiac issues. However, I am concerned about what seems to be ongoing family crisis that's affecting his health." My mother looked at me pleadingly. "Doctor, could stress from financial problems cause this kind of reaction?" "Absolutely. Financial anxiety is one of the leading causes of stress-related health incidents in patients Mr. Whitmore's age." That afternoon, while my father rested and my mother maintained her bedside vigil, I received a call from Timothy Ashford. "Cassie, I heard about your father. Is everything all right?" "He's going to be fine. It was stress-related, not cardiac." "And how are you handling all of this?" I considered his question carefully. 3 days ago, I would have been consumed with guilt, rushing to fix their problems and sacrificing my own well-being to restore their comfort. Now, I felt something entirely different. Compassion without compulsion. I think that it's sad that my father is suffering, but I'm not responsible for the choices that led to his stress. That sounds like progress. It feels like clarity. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected visitor to my new office. Harrison knocked on my doorframe with an amused expression. "You have visitors in conference room A. They've been waiting for 20 minutes and insist they won't leave until they speak with you." I found my parents sitting stiffly in the elegant conference room, both looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen them. My father was pale but alert, wearing a suit that seemed too large for his diminished frame.
"Cassandra," my father began formally, "we've come to discuss terms." "Terms for what?" "For your return to managing our financial affairs," my mother clarified. "We understand now that we underestimated the complexity of what you were handling." I sat across from them, maintaining professional composure. "I see. And what terms are you proposing?" My father cleared his throat. "We're prepared to offer you a formal salary of $150,000 annually, plus benefits, to resume your previous responsibilities." The offer was substantial by most standards, but laughably inadequate given my new position. More importantly, it revealed they still didn't understand the fundamental issue. "That's generous," I said, "but I'm afraid it doesn't address the core problem." "Which is?" my mother asked. "You're offering to pay me to return to a situation where my expertise was never respected, my contributions were never acknowledged, and my personal aspirations were consistently dismissed as inconvenient hobbies." I leaned forward slightly.
The financial crisis you're experiencing isn't really about money. It's about understanding that what I provided was sophisticated professional expertise, not basic family assistance. My father's jaw tightened. Everything we built together as a family. Everything you've maintained over the past 2 years, I maintained while you took credit for work you didn't understand. The truth hung in the air between us like a challenge. "What would it take," my mother asked quietly, "for you to consider helping us?" I pulled out a legal pad and began writing. Recognition, a formal consulting agreement that acknowledges my expertise, decision-making authority proportionate to my responsibility, and most importantly, respect for my professional judgment without constant second-guessing or dismissal. I slid the pad across the table. Those are my terms, not for employment, but for a consulting relationship between equals. My parents studied the list in silence, and I could see them grappling with a fundamental shift in how they viewed our relationship. The little girl they'd raised to be compliant and accommodating was gone, replaced by a professional who understood her own value and wouldn't accept anything less than appropriate recognition. Some transformations, I was learning, required more than just changing circumstances. They required changing the very foundation of how relationships were structured and maintained. 2 weeks later, I sat in my father's study, now officially my consulting office, during our scheduled meetings, reviewing the final details of our new arrangement. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was conducting business from the same desk where they'd dismissed me as a dependent spinster less than a month ago. The consulting agreement we'd negotiated was comprehensive and revolutionary for our family dynamic. I would provide financial oversight and strategic planning for Whitmore Industries at a rate of $500 per hour with a minimum monthly retainer of $20,000. More importantly, I had final approval authority on all major financial decisions, and my parents were contractually required to implement my recommendations without interference. "The quarterly board meeting is Thursday," my father said, sliding a folder across the desk. "I've prepared the presentation as we discussed." I reviewed his materials with the same professional scrutiny I applied to all my clients. The difference was remarkable. Instead of simply delivering my insights as his own, my father had accurately credited my analysis while presenting it with genuine understanding. "This is excellent work," I told him. "Your explanation of the Southeast Asian market expansion strategy shows real comprehension of the underlying financial projections." His face brightened with an expression I'd rarely seen, genuine pride and legitimate accomplishment rather than inherited authority. My mother appeared in the doorway carrying the tea service. "I thought you might want refreshments before your next appointment." The gesture was small but significant. For years, I'd been the one serving refreshments during their meetings with important visitors. Now, they were extending that courtesy to me in recognition of my professional status. "Thank you, Mother. Actually, I wanted to discuss the European vacation you've been planning. Based on the Q2 projections, I'd recommend postponing until after the Jameson contract finalizes. The cash flow timing would be more favorable." "Of course," she agreed immediately. "Whatever you think is best." 6 months ago, such a suggestion would have been met with dismissive arguments about how I didn't understand their social obligations. Now, they accepted my financial guidance with the deference typically reserved for respected experts. My phone buzzed with a text from Timothy. "Dinner tomorrow? I have news about the Meridian partnership opportunity." Our relationship had rekindled beautifully over the past month, built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than the previous dynamic where my availability had been contingent on my parents' approval. Timothy now understood that my time was valuable and scheduled accordingly, while I no longer felt guilty about prioritizing my personal happiness. "I need to leave for my 3 p.m. appointment," I announced, gathering my materials. "Harrison wants to discuss the Morrison Family Trust restructuring." "Of course," my father said. "Will you be available for the vendor meeting Friday morning?" "I'll be in Singapore on Friday, remember the Shen Industries consultation? Maria has all the vendor contact information if you need anything routine." The casual mention of international business travel was another marker of how dramatically our relationship had shifted. Instead of viewing my professional success as a threat to their control, my parents now took pride in my growing reputation.
That evening, I returned to my downtown apartment, which I'd kept despite their offers to move back home,
and found a package waiting. Inside was a leather portfolio embossed with Cassandra Whitmore, Senior Financial Consultant, and a note from Harrison. For our newest partner, the promotion is effective Monday. Partnership at Blackthorne Reed and Associates represented the pinnacle of achievement in family wealth management. At 25, I was the youngest partner in the firm's history, and my client list included some of the most prestigious names in the region. More importantly, I had built this success entirely on my own merits, without family connections or inherited advantages. Saturday brought an unexpected invitation. Gerald Pemberton called to invite me to join the board of directors for Millbrook County Community Foundation, the most influential charitable organization in the region. "We need someone with your expertise in family wealth management," he explained. "Too many family foundations struggle with succession planning and financial sustainability. Your background makes you uniquely qualified to guide our strategic development." The position would place me at the center of the county's philanthropic leadership, working alongside the most respected business and community leaders. It was exactly the kind of recognition I'd once dreamed of earning. Saturday dinner at the estate had become a monthly tradition, but with a completely different dynamic than our previous family meals. Instead of my parents holding court while I managed logistics in the background, we now gathered as equals, each contributing our own perspectives and expertise. "Damien called from Prague," my mother reported as we settled around the table. "He's planning to return next month to start his internship at the bank." My brother's European adventure had been cut short when his trust fund access was restructured under my new management protocols. Instead of unlimited spending, he now received a reasonable monthly allowance with requirements for regular check-ins and budget accountability. "How is he adjusting to the new financial structure?" I asked. "Surprisingly well," my father admitted. "He actually thanked us for forcing him to develop more discipline. Apparently, managing a limited budget has been educational." Structure often provides more freedom than unlimited resources. It teaches the difference between wants and needs. As dinner concluded, my parents walked me to my car, another small gesture that acknowledged the shift in our relationship dynamic. "Cassandra," my mother said hesitantly, "I want you to know how proud we are of what you've accomplished, not just professionally, but personally. You've shown remarkable strength and wisdom through all of this." "Thank you. That means more than you might realize." My father cleared his throat awkwardly. "I also want to apologize for how we handled your birthday. Our timing was unfortunate, and our understanding of your contributions was inadequate." The apology was more complete than I had expected, acknowledging not just poor timing, but fundamental misunderstanding of my value. "I appreciate that, Father. But honestly, being forced to establish independence was the best thing that could have happened to me. I discovered capabilities I didn't know I possessed." As I drove back to my apartment, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation of the past month. What had begun as a devastating betrayal, being kicked out on my birthday by parents who didn't recognize my worth, had evolved into the catalyst for building an authentic life based on my own terms. The young woman who had quietly managed her parents' empire while accepting their dismissive treatment was gone, replaced by a confident professional who commanded respect through demonstrated expertise rather than familial obligation. Monday morning at Blackthorne brought a surprise visitor. Maria Santos appeared in my office, looking nervous but determined. "Miss Cassandra, I hope you don't mind my coming here, but I wanted to speak with you privately." "Of course, Maria. Please sit down." "I wanted to thank you for what you did, not just with your parents, but for all of us who work at the house." I was puzzled. "I'm not sure I understand. Before you changed things, we were just employees. Your parents gave orders, we followed them, but there was no respect. Since you started managing their affairs properly, they treat us differently. They say please and thank you. They ask about our families. Mrs. Whitmore even helped me arrange time off when my daughter was sick." "I'm glad to hear that. It's because they learned what it feels like to not be in control, to need help from other people. It made them more human."
Maria's observation was profound. My parents' temporary helplessness had taught them empathy for others who depended on their consideration and respect. That afternoon, I received a call that would reshape my understanding of the entire experience. Miss Whitmore, this is Dr. Patricia Chen from Millbrook General. I hope you remember me from your father's recent hospitalization. Of course, Dr. Chen. Is everything all right? Everything is fine. I'm calling because I wanted to share something that might interest you. Your father has been attending our weekly support group for executives dealing with family business stress. I didn't know about that. He specifically requested that we not mention it to you initially, but yesterday he shared his story with the group about how his daughter taught him the difference between controlling wealth and understanding it. His perspective on your situation has become quite inspiring to other participants. The revelation was unexpected. My father, who had always been intensely private about family matters, was openly discussing our conflict as a learning experience. What exactly is he sharing?
That pride and assumptions about competence nearly cost him his relationship with the most capable person in his life. He talks about learning to recognize expertise regardless of its source, and about the difference between inherited authority and earned respect. As I hung up, I realized that the transformation hadn't been unilateral. While I'd been building my professional identity and learning to value my own contributions, my parents had been developing their own emotional intelligence and capacity for genuine appreciation. The following weekend, I visited the lake house where this entire journey had begun, the property my grandfather had built, where my parents had once planned to bring important clients, and where I'd first demonstrated my willingness to establish boundaries. Standing on the dock as the sun set over the water, I felt a profound sense of completion. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal in the original story had changed the locks to reclaim her authentic self. I had frozen the accounts for the same reason, not as punishment, but as a declaration that my value wouldn't be dismissed or taken for granted. Both stories shared the same essential truth. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do for people who don't recognize your worth is to stop providing services they don't appreciate, forcing them to understand exactly what they've been receiving all along. My phone buzzed with a text from Timothy. The partnership at Meridian is official. Celebrating with champagne tonight? I smiled as I typed my response. Absolutely. But let's make it a double celebration. I have news about the Community Foundation board position. As I locked up the lake house and drove back toward my new life, I felt grateful for the painful birthday that had forced me to choose between comfortable diminishment and challenging authenticity. The locked doors had led to open possibilities, and the frozen accounts had melted into flowing opportunities. Most importantly, I'd learned that the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property. It's the courage to demand recognition for your true capabilities and the wisdom to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than convenient dependence. Some lessons I discovered are indeed best taught through experience, and the best teachers are often the students who refuse to accept anything less than the education they deserve. Next up, 2 more stories chosen just for you. If you enjoyed this, you'll want to see what's coming. Tap to keep going.